Well, we're going to get started. My name is Brian Peters. I'm the interim director of the CTL, and I'm on my way out. So this is the last brown bag that I'm leading. So I wanted to take part in it just a little bit, but this really is Wesley Whitfield's show today. So I'm just going to give a little presentation and move into his, and we'll go into a discussion after that. Of course, we can talk about the things I'll be showing you on the board. Primarily, this is just to get sort of framework for the whole brown bag, and then this will be going on the CTL, hopefully for future reference as you all move through the next couple of years. I think this is what we need to keep in mind. So, what I'm talking about today is Howard Gardner's 5 Minds for the Future. Howard Gardner is one of the preeminent scholars in education theory and psychology in the country over the last 20-25 years. He first came out with a book called Multiple Intelligences, which is what has framed basically all discussion of education for the last 20 years. So he's a big deal, right? Not going to go on this too much. This is just for reference, but of course he came up with these 8 intelligences. The idea being, of course, that we're supposed to address these intelligences in the classroom. So we can't just teach at learners, assuming that they can process a lecture. We've got to switch things up. We've got to give them small group work. We've got to, engage them with tactile learning, all kinds of different things. That's what multiple intelligences is all about. And at this point, it's kind of old hat. In fact, a lot of people are trying to find flaws in that system. They're trying to narrow it down or expand it. But the idea is still the same, that we need to understand learners approach our lessons with a wide variety of skills. Hey. And that no one approach to teaching can engage all of our students. So we just need to make sure that we keep variety in the system. So his newest book is 5 Minds for the Future. I'm going to fly through this, like I said. I just want to give us an overview. What he's saying basically is that we have these intelligences, but for the future, we need to use those intelligences to cultivate these types of minds. So as instructors, we need to start with our students very early and work them through these tasks. But I believe, and he doesn't really address this much, but as a college, as an institution, when we go through the hiring process of whatever department we may be in, we just finished one in English, there's going to be more obviously in the future, we need to be looking for candidates that have these traits, that have started to cultivate these types of minds on their own. Because without these types of minds, we're not hiring the right people to guide us into the future. We're hiring people that are stagnant and not ready to progress. So he starts with the disciplined mind. He starts with this one mainly because this needs to begin very early in life. You need to, at some point in elementary school, begin your remedials, your math, your reading, etc. But a discipline is much different than just a subject. As you move through school, of course, you learn lots of subjects, but what he's trying to say about a disciplined mind is that you become an expert in one discipline. And right now, we have a lot of people who are not. And to get to become an expert, you have to get at least 10 years under your belt in some kind of field, whether it be history, whether it be neuroscience, whether it be nursing. When you become an expert, it's not until you put in that time. And that's the type of mind he's talking about here. It's not just being able to say something about English, it's about being an expert in English. So he says, for the future, we need minds that have developed a discipline. And along that way, he also uses discipline in the other sense, that you must be disciplined as you move through your discipline. And he gives many examples of other countries that, of course, have instilled in their students and their workers a great sense of discipline. In this country, we began that way 50 or 60 years ago. But of course, each year we get farther and farther away from it. The next one is the synthesizing mind. Hopefully we all know what synthesis is. Taking a wide variety of information, disparate things, and placing them together in conversation. And the reason he wants to talk about a synthesizing mind is because obviously the technological advances we're facing, the amount of information is overwhelming, and we need to have minds that can process that information and do something with it. So he's talking about primarily the ability to knit together that information from disparate sources. And what's most interesting is that he's moving from interdisciplinary, that's what we talk about a lot in education, We got to teach interdisciplinary, exercises, assignments. We've got to interact with our colleagues and different departments to make sure that we are writing across the curriculum, that we're engaging our students in different ways. But he says that's not good enough, because interdisciplinary, based on his system, means that you would have to be an expert in multiple disciplines. Right? And if that's 10 years for one discipline, in order for you to be truly interdisciplinary, you'd have to be an expert in two, which means at least 20 years. And our students don't have any of that stuff. Right? So what he wants to move to is a word that is admittedly very clunky. In fact, he says it is, but multi-perspectival, which simply means that you are able to synthesize information based on disparate sources, different perspectives, and you can process those things and make sense of them, but you're never going to be claiming that you're an expert in it. So there's just an interesting shift here, because we've been using interdisciplinary for 20 years. And he's trying to move us away from that, because he wants us to understand, of course, that to be truly disciplined. Creative mind is the most complicated of the bunch and the most difficult to pin down, but simply put, if you are a creative mind, you actually gain recognition in your field for changing that field. Just because you come up with some novel idea doesn't mean you have a creative mind. You actually have to be recognized by the field as someone who has changed based on your creative input. He points very quickly to things like 3M and Google. Those are places where they just say to their staff, here's a month, go figure something out. If you need to go to the mountains, if you need to go to the gym, whatever, I don't care. You come up with something creative, change the face of this company. Those companies with models he uses as companies who have encouraged and then rewarded their staff for creativity.
And they've also got great management.
And they're always known as like the best companies to work for.
Exactly. Can you go back to that slide again a little bit? I like that second bullet.
This is what 7 or 8 months ago, when I applied for this job, I said to Joyce, Vice President Banchek, I said, if we're going to change anything in the school, we have to accept the fact that we're going to fail a lot. Right now, there's this great fear in academia because the jobs are on the line, that if you fail, that somehow you're, compromising your credibility, and therefore you might lose your job. But if you're going to get anywhere, you've got to do that.
Yeah.
That's one of the main points of the whole book.
I like it more frequently, because what that implies is that you picked yourself back up again after once.
Exactly.
And then you do it again, and then you do it again. And that's how, for me, going to school was. If I did really bad, there was a reason why I wouldn't do it again.
Right.
But if I did it again later on, it would be a problem, because I knew that I recovered the last time.
Right. But life will go on.
Yeah. There's a sense, though, because of lack of discipline, that once you fail one time, that's it, I'm done now. I can't.
Too hard.
I'm done. Yep, I'm done. I like that bullet.
That's a good bullet. The respectful mind, the easiest one of all. This is simply you respect the people that you work with, that you encounter on a daily basis. Respect for others in green, right? That's the easiest one. This is the concrete, whereas the ethical mind is the abstract. So when he's asking you to think about an ethical mind, he's saying basically I don't know if you're familiar with, where is it? I put it in there somewhere. Did I miss it? Yeah, so John Rawls and his theory of justice, he talks about the veil of ignorance. Basically, as a citizen, you must be able to think about what something would be like for someone else. And if something for someone else is not good enough, you have to be responsible enough to change that, if you can. That's what he's talking about as he moves in from the concrete of the respectful mind into the abstract of the ethical mind. That you have to be a citizen who can think about other people's plight, other people's problems, tribulations, and if you cannot, then you are fundamentally flawed as a citizen. You cannot think outside of yourself, and that's something that we need to instill in our students, obviously, very early. But also, as colleagues, we have to be able to do that, right? We have to imagine what our students are going through, but also what our colleagues are going through. So the ethical mind is simply someone who can imagine, think about Plato and his forms if you want to, but you just have to imagine there's some sort of ideal way of life, that there is something that we all should strive for. And if we are doing something to hinder that, or if we see someone else doing something to hinder that, we've got to do something about it. I'm just going to leave that up there for later because I want to get to Wesley. It is up to the education system as a whole to ensure that this ensemble of minds is cultivated. So the task really is for an institution to decide that we are going to commit to this kind of project. Not only for our students, but also for, like here, our faculty. And that if we see someone or many people exhibiting these traits, we need to celebrate that. And if we see folks that are far behind in that curve, we need to obviously address it and get them on board. Yep.
Sorry, go back one more time. That same bullet you're talking about, the third one. Online is the way to go, or is the way things are moving. How feasible, or how far in terms of the completion rate, 100% versus 90% versus 50 versus none, does an online education system help that bullet? Just
Throw my
curious.
hands up.
Just curious.
I don't know. And he wrote the book in 2008, so he wasn't even prepared to think about that.
Probably
because
not.
University of Phoenix
I'm just curious.
didn't have the death grip that it has now, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I don't know what that would be, but
Because I agree with that, and I think a lot of people in education, who in education, believe in that too. But I just feel like that, to me, is anti, or not possible with online only.
right.
You know, I'm not saying you can supplement with online, but if it's just online
I think
only,
you would argue that instructional design,
Yeah,
yes, if it is done with these 5 minds, with a group of people that have those 5 minds, would it make sure that, of course, your online learning environment would actually translate all these 5 minds to the students? Of course, is that practical? I don't know, but that's what he would at least call for.
yeah, I'm just curious.
So anyway, that's it for me. I want to get to West Virginia. Matt, do you want to turn off the PowerPoint or just leave it up? Wes, do you want light or you like it the way it is?
This is fine. How's it going? Right there, okay, yeah. Okay, this is a fortune cookie I had today. I didn't plan this at all, which is how fortune cookies work, but I like this. This is what my, and I read it out loud to Tim here, and I was like, what the heck? But then I thought about it immediately. But here's what my fortune read. You will make many changes before settling satisfactorily. Interesting. That's what educators are all about. We gotta modify, we gotta modify, we gotta modify until we're really happy with our mode, right? Of how we convey our knowledge. Okay, so basically, I've had a lot of time to think and read about education and teaching, and basically what are some of the struggles I see with my students, and of course how I interact with my students, and how do I appease that for them and myself as well. Because it seemed like in the very beginning, and I'm not saying that there's an end right now, but the struggles I see a lot of my students have, I spend more of my time appeasing that and not paying attention to the struggles I'm having myself. And it's kind of, you can get dark. You can kind of get into a dark hole that way, because like I said, the empathy he's talking about and helping them get empathy, feel empathy and learn this ethical mind and whatever. I think it's kind of neat. But basically, what I wanted to do is just read a lot and just see what people have been talking about. And I love this library here at the CTL. Anybody who doesn't know about this place, the library is wonderful. I got 2 books I just like to talk about, just the titles, and tell you, kind of plug them. One is called Teaching Unprepared Students by, last name is Gabriel. Great book, thin, fast read, exceptional, give you a lot of neat ideas, because I think a lot of people, a lot of my colleagues, just a lot of people, even in other universities and colleges and online, I'm part of lots of these blogs having to do with research and also education, and everyone's saying the same thing that I feel and hear on a daily basis about unpreparedness. And then the other one is called Clueless in Academe by Groff. Oh boy, this is interesting. Sometimes I want to burn it. Sometimes I want to hug it and sleep. Sometimes I want to make them burn it again. It's a weird book. It takes you back and forth. But anyway, I just want to let you know some of the books that have influenced. Of course, there's about 15 others up here at the library that I've gone through, maybe more than that. But here's some things I wanted to talk about. With respect to classroom assessment and the idea of what that, weirdly enough, how that fortune cookie statement was, modification, right, until you settle. For what I'm talking about is some ideas of classroom assessment. I'm not going to go into all of them. I mean, we've actually had brown bags for them here before. I'm not going to use all of them that are out there, the classroom assessment techniques that Angelo and Cross have talked about. But if you're unfamiliar with CATs, I just want to give a plug to another book that I believe we do have here. It's called The Teaching Goals Inventory. And it's a 1993, so it's a little older, but it's got some ideas in it. And basically it runs you through course preparation, course planning, and kind of gets to the idea that when you're doing that, going through this textbook, or going through this book that they wrote, will give you the idea of when you're preparing and planning and getting ready to write a syllabus. You know, the syllabus, a lot of times we just try to get it done, or maybe we put too much thought into it, but a lot of times we make syllabi that may have missed very important salient things that you as an instructor really are responsible for conveying. And one of the things I wanted to mention here was, of course, what will you teach? Okay, that's go into it. But then when you're writing that, as you're doing your course preparation, your planning, coming up with the idea of what you will teach will then lead to the next obvious question. What are the accessible goals, all right, related to what I'm going to teach? And when you start thinking about that, and actually it does kind of work. I'm getting ready to start a new semester here in the summer, and I got some neat ideas from this process. But once you get the coming up with the accessible goals, what are they? Then you go to the expected learning outcomes, and I think most people are familiar with that. Does anybody make expected learning outcomes for your courses? Okay, it's nice. It's something that I can always just say, hey guys, it was online for you, and I handed it out. You kind of know what's, for chapter 8. This is what you're going to be assessed on, and it's really helpful. Back to the preparation and lack of preparedness. I'm not sure how helpful it is right now this semester. I've seen some opposites to that, but so I haven't really seen the expected learning outcomes working that well. But I think if people go read them, they will. But when you get the expected learning outcomes, then it drives into the specific focus, which then gives you direction for your everyday lecture, which is kind of neat to think about. So it's a really neat forward-thinking process that then when you're all done at the end of the semester, you should be able to look back and go, wow, those steps really worked to get to where I got to. But now, the accessible goals and the idea of assessment and the expected learning outcomes, they do something really interesting. One of the sentences I took from one of these textbooks, or one of these books I read was this: your expected learning outcomes should address the abilities or knowledge our students should be able to demonstrate. I'm sure we all know that, we've heard that. But the nice thing is that can lead to, again, a circulation amongst this process of how to create an assessment environment in your classroom. And that would be that you could tie that back to what you're going to teach and what are the accessible goals. So once you get the expected learning outcomes, which came from the accessible goals, and now feedback loop to it. The idea of, okay, what am I going to assess? What do I want them to demonstrate? And basically that leads to the idea of a determination of what your acceptable evidence was going to be, right? How did they demonstrate it? How did you ask them to demonstrate it? What's acceptable to you, and maybe even across the board, which gets into the idea of a campus-wide communication with professors. The idea that, just because I'm teaching introductory chemistry doesn't mean somebody in philosophy can't help somewhat come up with a way of evidence. What can I do with evidence to show that they've demonstrated something? So I think that's really important. I think the idea of creating that culture of inquiry, right, and just idea of how are we going to assess, how are we going to assess this stuff? It's really interesting, this feedback loop. Once you find out good ways or questions you need to ask to find out what are good, acceptable evidence would be, how is it demonstrated? Did they learn a skill, or they showed understanding? Then, of course, how is it measured? And then, ultimately, how are the grades assigned? And that's a whole rubric idea, too. You can go through that. Okay, any questions so far? Okay. How about you guys? Questions?
No.
Okay. Okay. Now I'm a very developing instructor. What I mean is that I'm changing almost all the time. It's funny though. One of my big resistances to change is the conception I still have for some reason. I'm not that old, so it probably is obvious. I always think back to when I was a student, and I got to stop doing that because I must have been more motivated and more driven. In other words, whatever the teacher or professor did, I was just, wow, that's cool. I'm going to do that, and then maybe be different for another, unit or whatever in the content of the course. Now I would change too, but the cool thing is that multi-perspectival thing. I think that's how I grew up. I think it was already happening, right? And I have a hard time getting my students to see it that way, to even try to get involved in that way. So back to this idea of assessment in the classroom, and like I said, if you've heard of classroom assessment techniques, it's really important to kind of get into the habit of looking to using those. I'm not good at using a lot of them. I have had semesters where I've used more and used less, but so basically the gist would be coming up with a variety of activities and projects. That is one way to think about approaching classroom-based assessment. So one thing I wanted to do here, before I get into that, is ask you guys, does everybody understand formative versus summative assessment? Anybody have any questions on what's the difference between them?
Would you be willing to
Yeah.
describe them? Just because
I
I'm
can.
a teacher.
I can.
So just state the difference
Okay.
right in here.
Okay. Is anybody else also? Okay. You guys? Question? Formative or summative assessment?
I probably need clarification.
Okay, that's great. Okay. So I'm not going to give the perfect textbook, but here's the gist. Okay. So most of us probably remember exams and quizzes, exams and quizzes, exams and quizzes, right? For English, essays, term papers, essays, term papers, right? Okay. So you got this idea that at the end of a unit, bam, here's the assessment. Next unit, bam, next assessment. Okay, that is summative. It's the sum part, all the parts within one unit. So at the end sum, what did you get out of that one big thing? Formative is 5 minutes into class, bam, here's a question. How you doing? Everybody holding up? 15 minutes into lecture, bam, you got that point, here's how I'm going to check. 10 minutes later, bam, here's another one. Maybe at the end, here's a take-home quiz. Okay, next lecture. First 10 minutes, bam, here's a bunch of questions. You guys get together, what's happening, get it, which problems. Okay, that's formative. It is, the biggest difference between the two is frequency. All right, F formative, frequency F. That's how I remembered it. Sum, you wait to add everything up at the end, right? Summative is the end. So that's one way to think about formative versus summative. I am a child of summative. I don't remember anything formative with respect to assessment when I went to school, but I'm looking back, I didn't need it. But I was also a very, very motivated student, okay? And that's my big problem as an educator, is that I want to compare people to me as I was a student, and I can't do that anymore. I'm not trying to say one's better than the other, but just it doesn't work the same. So basically the idea of adding variety to activities, projects, and formative assessments, it basically allows the different types, the Howard Gardner approach, of learning styles and strengths to be demonstrated. Okay, that's extremely important. And that's one thing I struggle with a lot too, is I teach chemistry, so there's a lot of math, there's a lot of conceptual stuff, and I ask questions of the class, and it seems like I hear somebody give an answer, but it's completely muddy. And then after I go back to my office, I'm like, you know what? I think they possibly had it, but it didn't come clear. Because they're not confident, and so it came out jumbled. Crap, I wish I would have given them more positive feedback on what they were trying to say, So that's the idea of letting a strength that somebody has that's different from somebody else. And that's why I kind of like the idea of these multiple intelligences in Howard Gardner's idea of learning, because one of the things that I'm a victim of myself is not allowing the different types of strengths to be demonstrated. So that's what a variety of activities and projects allow to happen in your class. That's the formative mindset. I like this little quote here. Here's another example of formative. Writing your feedback when you hand something back. That's even a formative right there in a way. That's happening just like that. It's not happening at the very end of a big long unit. It can happen at the end of any project or assignment or anything to hand in. But anyway, here's a quote. When students have an opportunity to make corrections, rework problems, rewrite drafts, or reanalyze, the learning and the understanding of what is being taught are improved. And I will tell you that that is true from experience. About a year and a half ago, what I made a new policy is in my exams, not excluding the final exam, I have 3 exams, and with quizzes interspersed and all that, but 3 exams, and basically what I allow my students to do is, you want to wait till the 3rd exam. I said, what I mean by wait is to hand something in. You want to wait till the third exam, so you have 3 opportunities to look and see what needs to be checked or reanalyzed or reworked. And then I say on the day of the final, you hand in to me on the day of the final one of those 3 exams, the one preferably that you did the worst on. Okay? And what I do is I give you 70% back of what you missed. So if you got 20 out of 100, it means you missed 80. 70% is 56. I'm going to add 56 back to your 20. That makes your 20 turn into a 76. So basically 70% of what you missed brings you up to that C range, right? And what that gives them confidence that they're not going to fail because maybe they made some bad choices for one part of the semester, right? But the idea that they're reanalyzing why they got those wrong. Sometimes I actually even write, this is what it should have been, here's why. Even though I don't do that on all of them, I let them see, okay, you get a chance now to show me what you could have done differently when you answered that. And that gets them to reiterate their learning and their understanding of what I wanted them to get the first time. That's an example of formative assessment. Okay, that really is. Maybe you're thinking, oh, that's just giving grades away, but not really. Because remember, the grade does matter, but at the same time, learning is way more important. That's what that's trying to do. So that's an example. And here's another quote. At the same time that you're doing these types of things, it says here, from back when I first started talking today, I made talk about that feedback loop. You can never forget that ultimately the decision on that idea to do that exam you can rework or whatever, any of those formative assessments, all the types that you choose from, all the types that are possible, all the ones you choose from, you have to keep in mind they always should be tied back to your expected learning outcomes. Okay, so that's why I let them rework an exam, because a lot of times, almost all the time, my questions on an exam are tied to the expected learning outcomes. So then to go and rework it and reanalyze lets them go back over the expected learning outcomes. And I always say, pull that expected learning outcome sheet out that I gave you, look at the exam that you did the worst on, and find out, oh, he wasn't kidding. He wasn't kidding. This is what he was, boom. They always do better on the next exam. Always. Okay. So, this is why I thought that fortune cookie was so cool. One of the other quotes here is, teachers are always able to modify and adjust methods as we receive evidence of our students' learning. Okay? That's what formative assessment's goal is. It's not just for the students, it's for us as well. All right? We're not cast in stone, we're not unchangeable, right? We're still students, right? If we want them to change, we should be able to change too. So I thought that was kind of a really cool idea. Okay, any questions so far? I'm just throwing out weird things, you guys, so weird ways. Any questions for you guys? Can you hear everything okay? Am I clear?
Yes.
Okay.
Are you fired up?
What's like in your
Wait. Okay, how much time do I got? I just got ideas left over.
As much as you need. Man.
Okay. Basically what I have, I don't have too much left, but I just have a little short list of formative assessment examples, ideas, okay? And some of these you can find in Angelo and Cross. Some of them I found from these 2 textbooks, and then I said maybe 15 other textbooks on this bookshelf here. Okay, so ideas for classroom-based assessment. These are formative. So again, just to reiterate, formative, these are sources of feedback to improve teaching and learning. That's what another way to view what formative assessment is.
what was that from again?
Oh boy, that one's from,
That's okay.
yeah, I returned it. It's in here somewhere. I can't remember I didn't write that author down. I just remembered it after I handed it in. I go through so many of these books, it's ridiculous. I can't remember. Oh, yeah. LD Fink, Creating Significant Learning Experiences. I believe that's the one. Okay. So I'm just going to throw some ideas out that I read about. These are kind of neat. I'm going to do this one this summer. I can't wait. This one's actually kind of neat. I do PowerPoint slides. I don't read my slides. I've actually supplanted most of my text with more visuals, and I use a lot of weird techniques in lecture, so I don't ever end up reading anything. But here's one really neat idea. Within the first 20 minutes of lecture, okay, when the students are coming in, maybe even 10, 15, whatever you feel is comfortable. And I've actually seen one instructor do this, an adjunct up at Northwest. I was really impressed. This guy really rocked my world. Multiple choice questions on a PowerPoint slide, already built into your lecture. Come to that slide within the first 20 minutes of lecture. Now this is the neat part. This kind of gets fun, tactile, visual. You can give students at the beginning of the semester, and so they can prepare for this idea of how some of this formative assessment will occur, give them colored cards maybe, or maybe, yeah, colored for easier for you to be able to see from the front of the classroom. Maybe like green, blue, yellow, and red colored cards, you know, whoever. However many multiple choice questions you anticipate having on a given slide, right? So you're gonna have 7 or 8, you're gonna want a lot of different colors. But what's a really cool idea is, a lot of students are really shy in the beginning to really talk and say much. Some people are not, right? Sometimes it takes up time. But you've heard of the electronic clickers, all right? This is a less expensive route. You can color code the lecture slide options for the answers with the color cards that you hand out, and then they can hold up their cards, and then you can quickly count how many blues and how many greens are held up. Okay, once you do that, you take the distribution of those and basically discuss with the students what the distribution is, and then you can either give them their own time, you just step out of the role as a, if a leader or a teacher or whatever, and let the students talk to each other and try to convince each other. You can even do that before you show the results, which is really engaging, right? I've never done this, but I can't wait. I think it should be really cool. So, you can get the greens fighting the blues. Why did you do this? No, you gotta turn blue, go blue. No, go green, go green. You never know. It could be pretty cool. That's one way that somebody mentioned a really interesting and exciting, especially for 8 a.m., right? An 8 a.m. class like chemistry, right? Rock, it's awesome. No. So that's a really cool thing that I'm thinking about trying. And this is one of the things that I saw from Midland State College, Midland Community College. I can remember. I think that's one of the community colleges that uses that, and they're very, very successful community college with respect to assessment. Okay, one of the other ones, I've never done this. You guys have probably heard it, write, pair, share. Okay. Now, I've never done it because I'm not sure how well it would work in a chemistry environment. It might be okay. Brian, do you ever do write, pair, share?
Why don't you tell us just for the record?
Okay. Write, pair, share, I'm getting this correct, okay, because I just kind of skimmed over it because I was like, well, but I was like, oh, not everybody's a chemistry instructor, so I should come up with something different. So write, pair, share, what I believe, if I'm thinking about this correctly, is write a statement on the board, okay? Maybe it's even just true or false. That's right, W-R-I-T-E, and then pair, get students to pair up. I think they said 2 people, of course pair means 2. I think they said that 3 is also capable in case you have that odd number. And I think, if I'm correct, they discuss what the correct answer is supposed to be, what they think it is. And I believe then they just share the idea of what happened. Why did you come up with this answer? Okay, and then that kind of creates discussions. Now, like I said, I could be wrong. Maybe you're only supposed to look to the group next to you and share. I don't know if it's share with the whole class, or if it's just share with one other group, one other pair or so. But it's kind of neat. And I would like to do that in mine, but I can't. I don't have time to do that kind of thing in my classroom, but there are classroom environments where that probably will work fine.
You could maybe have them conduct that conversation virtually
Yeah.
after class. So you'd write a
Yeah.
prompt and then they could pair up online and yeah.
I'm so glad you brought that up. I have taken advantage of Blackboard 100% since about 2 years ago. And one of the things I have is classroom discussion, so they can go on and say, hey, I didn't get how this one question works. What did you guys get? Last semester, I had a lot of people using it. I haven't had anybody use it this semester. So I've tried. I put everything out there. It's always up to them though, right? And that's one of the hard things about being a teacher, is that you come up with all these great ideas and you do it. And sometimes no one takes the bait, right? Can't forget, it is their responsibility, always, right? I can't also go to the job interview with them afterwards. I can't go to the first week on the job, right? Can't do that. So that's just how I feel about it, but there's only so much I can do. You can always do more than that, but sometimes it doesn't matter. This last one, metacognitive moment. This is my favorite thing to do. I use weird analogies, but they're analogies that people in the age groups of my classroom they'll get it. I don't want to use something that made somebody who was a student in 1960 laugh, right? It's got to be something. This is I didn't even know there was a word for this, but this is basically what it is: metacognitive moment. Basically, what it is you connect new info being learned to what they already know. Okay, that's the meta idea, right? The in-between stage on the way to the new from the old. Okay, so just a couple bullet points about this idea. One person said what they do, or one essayist said, was, again, on a PowerPoint slide in a lecture, they put 5 simple, analytical, synthesizing questions. There's your synthesis again, synthesizing questions, on the PowerPoint slide. Break them up into 3 to 4 students per group. No, but they did, he put specifically no more than 4. I'm not sure why. Interesting, but no more than 4. But 3 to 4 students per group, and have them discuss what the answers are. They have to be yes or no, just for time-wise, probably. I'm not saying they have to be, but he suggested just yes or no, just like he suggested no more than 4. And then, basically, they all agree on it, or they do not all agree, right? Yes or no, right? One way or the other. Okay. Well, what's also interesting is, you look at they all agree. Okay, then maybe you can have a discussion about that. Or you could just kind of say, you know what, you all agreed, all right, I'm going to leave you alone. I'm not going to muddy your understanding already. Possibly, right? I've had that happen. I've had students who totally got it, and then came and then they're like, oh my gosh, this is gone now. I don't know what just happened. It's gone. I don't get it. And they actually did bad. I was like, what happened? How did that? I just gave you more. More detail, and it didn't work. So here's the other option, though. They did not all agree, or they're unsure. And so basically what happens is, with this metacognitive moment, okay, you could take something from a chapter 3 concept, and then maybe the question says, you know, when we learned in chapter 3 with this respect to this, it is applicable to this. I'm just being very, very, very generic here. Yes or no. Okay, and then the question is, if they don't think they're unsure, or if it's no, talk about why. Okay, but if it's yes, you can also talk about why. Whatever, it's up to you. So again, this is all these, there's like a lot of open ends here, and that's because we can modify. We should be able to modify and change. We don't come in and just say, all right, this is how it goes. It's how do you want it to go? All right, that's the whole idea of engagement. And what do we call it? What was the word that empowering? Is that right? What was that thing we had? Empowerment, wasn't it? Where we gave it. You teach this crap, remember? What was that an example of? I can't remember.
Agency, yeah,
Yeah.
empowerment. But
Yeah.
what you're doing is decentering the classroom,
Yes.
which is really important.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, like I said, I'm not really doing this yet, but I've been taking baby steps to doing things like this. I just didn't really know or feel comfortable stepping out of my box. I haven't been allowing myself to get modified, you know. It's not that I always just stick with what I've done, even though it doesn't work. I change every semester. In fact, I don't even reuse PowerPoints. I create new ones every semester. And that helps me change, but it seems like I always get kind of sucked back into my own same strategies, whether they work or not. So the idea is classroom-based assessment. Formative is probably one of the best ways to think about how to assess learning. You're going to get the most bang for the buck, is what everyone says in all the textbooks I've read, all these books. And the idea clearly is, maybe it's time to exit just quiz and just exam. That's it. You know, that's what I'm used to. That's all I needed. But that's not the same people today, right? And of course, it's never going to be the same person anyway. Genes and genetics and all that. I mean, so that's basically my gist. Is think about the idea of formative assessment more than summative. All right, maybe leave summative up to the big departmental and division type things. But formative should be what takes place in the classroom. So, is that clear? I mean, is my message clear?
Have
Yeah.
you ever come across, I know you've read a lot of books on teaching, has there ever been one that's tried to write about sort of the history of assessment and its
That's a good
impact
question.
or effectiveness in academia?
Yeah, I have checked up something on that, and basically, Clueless in Academia talked a little bit about it. This is a different book. That was something different. Okay, actually, it's just interesting you should ask about that, because this may seem like it's going to stray a little bit from what your question is, but I'm just going to give you something that I thought about while I was reading, and it made a lot of sense about lack of preparation. Okay, this is really interesting. I'm not sure if it's 100% correct, but historically, right? Okay, before World War II, a lot of younger kids, you know, elementary, middle school, they were on the farm, or they were really helping at home. They were steeped in the world of adults all the time. They could run around and play the little games, but most of the time, kids did adult things. They helped adults out. They were always around adults, okay? I think after World War II, what this author I was reading mentioned was, after World War II, I don't know if it's because of trauma or because the families could reunite, you know, when he or she came back from the war. But what was interesting was, that's when schools really started to take off. That's when schools really became big. And all of a sudden, schools were where the kids went. And the kids then all of a sudden were in places where the adults were not. And all of a sudden became the culture of youth, which is what I think I'm not sure of the name of the text, the name of the book I read, but this idea of a youth culture, where we're separate from adults and we're going to resist it all up until you really force us, which happens around 18 or 19, right? So the idea is that the school system has been isolating kids from the culture of the real world when they come out and letting them have their own little culture of the shopping malls and the Facebooking and the texting instead of really entering into what they're expected to do in higher education environments and even work. So with respect to assessment then, the idea is it changed a lot after that, especially when when World War II ended and the school started to become a very, very strong, like the place for the elementary, you know, for kids to go during the day when both parents are at work, you know. So I think what I've read was eventually somehow maybe cockiness and ego came in, and basically they said, all right, we got our system, we're done. And I think assessment kind of stagnated for a while. I believe towards the middle of the 70s, things started to get radical. You've read a couple of books. And then I think what they said was about 80s, late 80s and early 90s, and all throughout the rest of the time since then, assessment's almost been one of the key things that's been going on. So with respect to history, it's really interesting to note from what I've read, it looks like after World War II is when people started to really go, we need to do something different than what we've accepted.
Well, of course, it's been going on since any time.
Oh, heck yeah.
Teaching's been, but the actual term assessment first arose in the 70s? Or
I'm not sure. It sounds like maybe 60s, if I remember right from a couple of just random sentences that I'm remembering, but it might have been the 70s. Yeah, just because that's when a lot of radical changes were happening. But I just know from reading all these books that assessment is something that everything is all about now in terms of educational environments. Any questions? You guys out there? You guys, any questions?
I have one.
Okay.
So those are the techniques we can use in the classroom
Yeah.
to gauge
A
their
few of
learning.
them.
Right.
Yep.
What do you do to make sense of that data at the end of a semester?
Ah, yes. The never-ending job of the instructor once you enter the world of assessment. On top of what you already do, right? So your question is, how do you interpret the results, right? Okay.
How do you
That's
know
good.
what to use, going forward?
Okay, that's a good question. I think I've not read a lot completely, but what I've started to understand from getting into those chapters from all the books I've read, it seems like I get through like 5 chapters and it's like, all right, I gotta go with something different for a while. So I never make it to the same spot. I always get to the same spot in all these books. But from what it looks like is you can do several things. And one of them, of course, is you could go to a really interesting thing, which I think is neat from a research perspective. When we were all grad students, right, going for a PhD or a master's or whatever, you had group meetings, right? So one of the things is you could get with your colleagues in your field and have a group meeting and say, look at all these results. Here's what I did. Here's what my expected learning outcomes. What do you think I could do differently, or what could I change, or how do I take this as evidence that things are working out good? Okay. Another thing is, of course, student testimonial, which you can, we have structured evaluations, but why not do them more commonly, right? That's another weird way of formative assessment. All right. That's one of the things that I think is kind of neat. I did that this semester. It was really cool in Gen Chem, but the funny thing is, 3 out of 20 did anything. And one person was very like, "Wah," but then I realized they weren't being mean. They were just like, I want to tell him. I can't wait. Thank you for asking, And then the other 2 were very, very, very nice. I mean, very clear and very just professional. It's like, oh, you know what? I'm going to do what you said. I'm going to do what you suggest. So that was only 3 to 4 students out of, like I said, 27, 28, or whatever it was, 20. Not very many people have done it. So I'm going to try it again this summer. Does that answer your question?
Sure.
Okay. One other thing I wanted to mention as far as the CAT, and I have one experience with this is the last thing I want to talk about, was the idea of what are students coming into the classroom already knowing. And I'm not talking about preparation. Okay, there's a whole idea of at-risk and underprepared. That's totally fine. But this thing's really interesting, and it is one of Angelo's process techniques, and I can't remember the exact term for it, but let's say chemistry, right? You take introductory chemistry. These are students who are not coming into introductory chemistry who want to go into chemistry. They just have to have it, okay? So misperception, there we go. Misconception, misperception. So I like to ask little cool questions, like give these fake quizzes that are not really worth any points, and they're just really silly statements. You know, some of them are like from cartoons, you know. No one knows they're from cartoons, but they're just things that cartoons have taught, like Acme explosives, you know, and cactus and the, you know, the Roadrunners type stuff, you know, or whatever Johnny Neutrino or whatever his name is, whatever people watch when they were in high school. And so I'll throw always really, really dumb things. One or two of them might be right on, but still kind of worded interestingly, you know, interestingly. So no one can go, well, obviously that's different, so I'm going to choose that one. So basically, I'm checking out what are your conceptions as you come in that chemistry is, okay? Then the cool thing is you can do two things, and what I did was I gave the same quiz at the end of the semester, okay? And it was really cool, because I didn't tell them I was going to do that. I just said, you know, hey, maybe you can look at this throughout the year and find out, you know, how I feel differently about this now. Wow, what was I thinking? That's one really cool way, and of course the evidence will be at the end, whether they learned or not, whether you were successful at conveying what should be the truth, really, right? The reality of it instead of the misperception, misconception. So that's one of my favorites that I've only done, like I said, I only did the one time. It seemed like summer I have a lot more fun trying things out, even though it's pretty fast paced, but I just have so many classes during the regular semesters, I just can't keep straight. Did I do that in general? Did I do that oh gosh, I forgot. Did I already do that? I hate to repeat. It just gets so confusing. I start out with good intentions and then it just gets all chaos. So organization, number one thing for instructors. Got to be more organized. So that's all I have. Hopefully I gave some neat ideas.
That's a flourish at the end.
Does anybody have any other questions? It's okay. Any other questions for you?
Well, thanks for joining up at Arnold. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Have a good day.
Bye.
You guys have any questions?
Just getting ideas, thanks.
Oh, yeah.
Just all about getting
Oh,
ideas.
I have them. I haven't used them all, but I have them. I always, like I said, good intentions at the beginning and then
Oops, sorry guys. Don't bump that. Watch the camera. But Jim, no, in all fairness, that thing really good Please just don't touch the camera, okay? Somebody in the